Hello, everyone. I'm Juan Williams, along with Emily Campagno, Jesse Waters, Dana Perino, and Dr. Greg Gutfeld. It's 5 o'clock in New York City. This is The Five. The White House, Washington, all of America, waiting on the Mueller report. Anticipation growing as all signs point to the Russia probe results being released very soon. It's not even out yet, but everyone seems to have an opinion on what it all means for President Trump.
There are indictments in this president's future. They're coming.
The idea that Robert Mueller is somehow Harry Potter and that this report is this wand that's going to fix everything and all we have to do is wait for Mueller, I think is going to be proved to be ill-advised on the part of Democrats.
And I would think it would be more descriptive, more accurate to quit calling it the Mueller report whenever it comes out. But it's more like a Mueller dossier.
We get an asterisk in the history books thanks to this investigation, so we can put next to the 2016 election that little thing like Barry Bonds used drugs kind of thing. Will there be an asterisk?
Even if it says guilty, which again, it doesn't say that, but in like 48-point font, right, the president would say it clears him. I think that is a safe political expectation to make here.
Well, here's the president and how he thinks the public will take it.
I have a deputy appoints a man to write a report on me to make a determination on my presidency. People will not stand for it. Now, with all of that being said, for 2 years we've gone through this nonsense because there's no collusion with Russia. You know that better than anybody. And there's no obstruction. They'll say, oh, well, wait, there was no collusion. That was a hoax. But he obstructed in fighting against the hoax.
But even after the report drops, that's just the beginning. Democrats planning to launch several of their own Trump-related investigations. However, according to the Daily Beast, Trump's lawyers are preparing to tell Democrats to go, well, blank themselves. Trump saying the Democrats will be just wasting everyone's time. Jesse,
it's just a continuation of the same witch hunt. They know it, and behind closed doors, they laugh at it. It's just a continuation of the same nonsense. Everybody knows. They ought to go to work, get infrastructure done, and get a lot of other things done instead of wasting everybody's time.
All right, so we've just been told that the Mueller report has been delivered to the Attorney General, William Barr, but we don't know any details as yet, and we don't know when we'll know any of the details, whether it'll be a matter of hours, a matter of days, weeks, months. We just don't know. Jesse, where are you?
Well, Mueller took too long. He lost all his momentum. It's kind of like the guy at the barbecue when you invite everybody over at 5 and then at 7, no one's eaten yet. And then he burns the meat. And you said, I waited 2 years for this? This is terrible. I honestly don't think the rest of the country outside of the swamp and the partisans really care about the Mueller report. They care about the brackets for the NCAA. They care about spring vacation, and they care about what's on Netflix. With that said, if there was real collusion, it would have leaked by now. We know that for a fact. So if the report comes back, and it looks like the media is already trying to set expectations for the Democrats that have Trump derangement syndrome, that there is no collusion, I don't know what they're going to do. Is there going to be soul searching among the Democrats and the media and say, what have we done for the last 2 years with this conspiracy? Are they going to learn from their mistakes? I don't think they will, because the media is probably going to cover up their mistakes. The new conspiracy will be that whatever Barr, the new AG, says or doesn't say, he's going to be hiding something. Because as you know, the rules say he doesn't have to disclose everything. So they're going to say there is collusion, but Barr won't tell us what it is, and this will go on and on and on, and it will never end.
All right. This is a Fox News alert. Again, Robert Mueller has submitted his report on the Russia investigation to Attorney General William Barr. The special counsel has been probing alleged Russia interference in the 2016 election for the past 21 months, the move now setting up a potential showdown over how much of it will be made public. Barr has indicated he's likely to send his own summary of the findings to Congress rather than Mueller's actual report, while Democrats have threatened to subpoena Mueller to testify publicly about what he found. Mueller's team has either indicted, convicted, or gotten guilty pleas from 34 people and 3 companies, including 6 former Trump advisors and or associates. Dana, we just don't know who's been indicted, who's been exonerated, but the president, in talking with Maria Bartiromo this morning, says people won't stand for it if it indicates that there was some wrongdoing, because he continues to say it was a witch hunt.
Okay, so I just want to take a little step back and remember that, yes, of course, the media covers the angle like, okay, so was there Trump collusion, Trump involvement, and that has been with the media, and frankly, we have all been talking about. But remember, the genesis of this report wasn't about any bad dealings on behalf of the Trumps. It was about the Russians,
right,
and influence and attempted influence and basically trying to disrupt our elections. And we know from our intelligence agencies and from the Department of Homeland Security that those efforts by the Russians continue to this day, and we are headed into a very important election. So setting aside what it says or doesn't say about how Russia tried to get involved with these people, if there was involvement, et cetera, I think that this report could actually be quite instructive about what we need to do to protect our elections going forward, like how big that threat is. I think that's even more important than anything else, because we obviously our country is surviving. We're not in a constitutional crisis, but going forward, if people don't trust the outcome of an election, then it really could all fall apart.
That's a great point.
Oh, thank you.
John Roberts is with us now. John?
Good afternoon to you, Juan. We're expecting very shortly a statement from the president's outside attorneys, Jay Sekulow and Rudy Giuliani. I should have it momentarily on my phone. We'll let you know as soon as I get it. Earlier this morning, the president said he had no idea. He was in the dark like the rest of us about when this report might come out, but he did his best as he was leaving for Mar-a-Lago this morning to discredit the Mueller investigation yet again, and whatever the contents of the report might be, again saying that there was no collusion and that there was a witch hunt. Now, we do not know exactly what the process is going to be from here on. We do know that the special counsel's office has delivered this, as it has to by statute, to the Attorney General. The Attorney General will now review it and decide what will be sent to Congress, if anything will be sent to Congress, and what might be made public, if anything will be made public. Barr said during his confirmation hearings that he would do his best to make as much of the report public as he possibly could. There's also a potential here for the White House to get involved. If there is no material in the report that is subject to executive privilege, the White House might not ask to see it. But if there is material contained in the report that is subject to executive privilege, Pat Cipollone, the White House counsel here at 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue, may put in a request to the Department of Justice to review it, to either waive executive privilege on the items that might be included in it, or to request redactions of the Department of Justice, and then it would be up again to William Barr, the Attorney General, and his team to make those redactions or decide if the redactions are necessary before anything was released to Congress and then to the public. It's also possible, because don't forget, this is all within the same branch of government. The Office of the Special Counsel is appointed by the Department of Justice, which is part of the administration. So this is all under Article 2 of the Constitution, and it would be within the president's purview and his authorization to request to see this report before it goes to Congress. I'm told that that's probably the least likely scenario, but for now, this is in the hands of the Attorney General, and we'll see what William Barr decides to do with it. The president said this morning that he has full faith in the Attorney General and that he believes that he will make the right decision on what to do next. Juan?
John Roberts at the White House. John, thank you very much. Again, to recap for those of you just joining, the Robert Mueller report has been submitted to the Department of Justice. It's now in the hands of Attorney General William Barr. Now we're joined by Catherine Herridge in our Washington Bureau. Catherine?
All right, just in a few minutes, Juan, I'm going to head down to the Justice Department, but we've got some information about kind of the tick-tock of events over the last hour. We have confirmed that a letter was sent to the chairman and ranking members of the Senate and House Judiciary Committees notifying them that the special counsel Robert Mueller investigation was completed. Let me just read for a second from that text. It says, quote, Special Counsel Robert Mueller III has concluded his investigation of Russian interference, but this is the important part. Attorney General William Barr says, quote, he may be in a position to advise you, the committees, of the special counsel's principal conclusions as soon as this weekend. So this is the first time that we've had an indication that the Attorney General may be able to move very quickly in terms of releasing some information and the findings to Congress. What's not in the letter so far that we've seen is a timetable for a public release. This whole process now will be governed by something called 28 CFR 600. That's the Code of Federal Regulations. It's very explicit that the Attorney General receives a confidential report and that there has to be notification to Congress of the findings. It's a little more vague on whether that's a summary from the Attorney General or whether he can include some of the raw data, if you will, from the Mueller report. The other thing that's often neglected in this discussion, which is stipulated in the regulations, is that there is a requirement by the Justice Department to notify Congress of any actions that Special Counsel Robert Mueller wanted to take but was blocked from taking by the Attorney General or an acting Attorney General. So that's the other thing to really watch. So again, to recap, things have moved very quickly in the last hour. My contact said they were notified of a short notice meeting on Capitol Hill, Republicans and Democrats on the House Judiciary Committee, that it would involve the Justice Department. And now we have confirmation of a letter to the ranking members and the chairman on those committees that the Mueller report is now complete. Juan.
Stay with us. Dana has a question.
Catherine,
Sure.
I did have a question. It might just be a little bit of a timing thing, because when you said that it's possible that the Attorney General could, as soon as this weekend, release something, a couple of weeks ago, there were rumors that this report had been delivered to the Attorney General. Do you think it is possible that that is true, that the Attorney General has had this report, and that is why they're making this announcement late on a Friday night, and that they think that they could turn around something? Because it doesn't seem to me, if he was actually just receiving it, that he could turn something around that quickly by Sunday.
Well, if you look at the regulations, it's very specific about what has to be provided to Congress. It has to provide a cataloging, if you will, of the prosecutions that were brought, and also what they call declinations. So these are decisions not to proceed with criminal prosecutions because they feel they don't have sufficient evidence to do so. That is not a lengthy document that goes into the underlying evidence. And the reason I mention that is that the Deputy Attorney General Rod Rosenstein was very clear in a letter to Senator Grassley, the former head of the Senate Judiciary Committee, when he said, in effect, that he didn't want to repeat the same mistakes that were made in 2016, that it's not the department's position to release information that is damaging to individuals who are never prosecuted for any crimes in the future. And that was a reference, and it's cited in the letter, to the former FBI Director James Comey and his decision to publicly discuss the findings in the Clinton email case, but then to recommend against criminal prosecution. So the long answer to your concise question is that when you look at the regulations, it's entirely possible to deliver sort of the bare bones of what's required in a very short time frame. The unknown in all of this is whether the Attorney General, William Barr, will in fact go further, because he has some discretion to provide additional information, and that he also feels it's within the public interest to do so. And that really was at the heart, if you will, or the main element of his testimony during the confirmation hearings, that he pledged to do that to the extent that he was able. Dana.
Catherine, thanks. We want to now
You're welcome.
go to Shannon Bream. Shannon, of course, our Supreme Court reporter. And Shannon, we're very interested in the future legal fight facing the president.
Yeah, because no matter what happens with this report, you know, there are other things that are bubbling out there that could be very problematic for the president on a legal field. You think about the cases that are pending in the Southern District of New York, investigations going on there. There are all kinds of things at the state level, too, in New York that have come with respect to the Trump Organization and Foundation and other things that the Attorney General there has said that they're looking into. So regardless of whether this concludes the Russia collusion part of the investigation, there are many other things the White House is going to have to still manage on the legal front. And one thing to watch for here, it's possible as parts of the findings of the special counsel eventually are meted out first to top level congressional level leaders. And don't forget, the Attorney General here, Barr, has said he wants to get as much of it out into the public as he can responsibly do with any kind of classified information. It's possible that Congress may at some point try to subpoena even the special counsel or the report itself to have him come before them. That is a fight that you could see go all the way to to the U.S. Supreme Court. So there are still a lot of potential legal pitfalls here for the administration. But the president certainly, if he feels vindicated and cleared by this report, will have plenty to celebrate on that front. It just means there are other issues they're still going to have to pay attention to aside from this report.
Dana, you want to jump back in?
Shannon, one question for you is that we know that several people have been leaving the Mueller investigation to go back to their jobs. But we also know that there is a possibility, and maybe this is what you mean, is that maybe there will be some no more indictments coming from Mueller, but there are other investigations that that are underway and that could continue.
Yeah, exactly right. Because when you think about what's going on the federal and the state level based out of New York, there are plenty of things that are going on there. That's where we saw these cases with Michael Cohen going on. And there are many other things, as I said, with the Trump Foundation, with charities, with different things the family's been involved with, the Trump Organization. So a lot of things were spun off from the special counsel investigation to some of these other places. Some of them were originated themselves anyway in other ways at the state level. But yeah, there's a lot more.
Can we stop you there? Because I think Catherine Herridge has some more for us. Catherine?
So I want to just tell you a little bit more about what the Justice Department and Special Counsel have communicated, Dana, to the congressional committees that have direct oversight. Just a few minutes ago, we talked about how the Attorney General had told them, and I'm reading here, quote, he may also be in a position to advise you, the committees, of the Special Counsel's principal conclusions as soon as this weekend. Remember, we talked about whether there would be more information forthcoming. Well, now I have part of that answer because the letter continues from Attorney General William Barr, quote, separately, I intend to consult with Deputy Attorney General Rod Rosenstein and Special Counsel Mueller to determine what other information from the report can be released to Congress and the public consistent with the law, including the special counsel regulations and the department's longstanding practices and policies. So let me just kind of read in between the lines here for you. What's been communicated to Congress is that the Attorney General could tell them as soon as this weekend the kind of bare bones, bottom line findings in the Mueller report. So the prosecutions and what we discussed a few minutes ago, the declination, so decisions not to prosecute because there wasn't sufficient evidence for a conviction. But based on this latter part of the letter, you can see that there's going to be a follow-on discussion with the Deputy Attorney General Rod Rosenstein and the Special Counsel Robert Mueller and Attorney General William Barr to consider whether the underlying findings of the investigation can be further released to Congress and then also to the public. But the key phrase here is, if I could just emphasize this, in keeping with department regulations. Department regulations stipulate, if you will, that you do not release damaging information about individuals who you do not recommend for criminal prosecution. So that's kind of where the curtain comes down, and they've got to find the way to navigate that, Dana.
It sounds like a good policy indeed. All right, Catherine Herridge, thank you.
You're
Bret
welcome.
Baier, I think that we have you now. Bret Baier, of course, the anchor of Special Report. Taking over for us here. Bret, do we have you?
This is a Fox News alert. The long-awaited moment has happened. Special Counsel Robert Mueller has given the report over to the Department of Justice earlier this afternoon, handing that report to the Deputy Attorney General Rod Rosenstein, who then took the report to the Attorney General William Barr. The White House, we're told, was notified at about 4:45 in the afternoon before Congress, but then a letter from the Attorney General arrived to the House and Senate Judiciary Chairman and Ranking Member saying that the Mueller report had, in fact, been received. Now we are in a wait-and-see mode to see exactly what we find out from the conclusions of this investigation. Special Counsel Robert Mueller has been working all this time. There's been a lot of talk back and forth, what maybe he could find, what he might not find. But now the Attorney General has the decision, along with the Deputy Attorney General, speaking with, he says, the Special Counsel, what can and should be put public to Capitol Hill and then to the American public. There's been a vote on Capitol Hill for full transparency of the Special Counsel report. In the House, it was 420-0. It has not come up in the Senate. President Trump has said that he would be in favor of seeing this report come out public, not knowing what exactly is in it so far. We await word for what is next, but we can tell you that this is moving forward and that the report itself has been briefed to the Attorney General. Both the Attorney General and the Deputy Attorney General have read the report. There is a statement we're just getting right now as I'm speaking from the President's attorney. John Roberts is at the White House with the very latest there. John.
Hey, Brett, good afternoon to you. We are now finally hearing from the President's attorneys, Jay Sekulow and Rudy Giuliani. Rudy Giuliani flew down just the other day from New York to be here because there was an indication that this report was going to get transmitted to William Barr. And now a joint statement from Jay Sekulow and Rudy Giuliani saying, quote, "We are pleased that the Office of Special Counsel has delivered its report to the Attorney General pursuant to the regulations. Attorney General Barr will determine the appropriate next steps." Giuliani was going to go down to Mar-a-Lago to join the president this weekend if this report had not been dropped, but now it's likely that he will appear on a number of Sunday morning television shows to talk about their side of the story. Of course, the president and the president's attorneys have maintained all along that there is no collusion, that there is no culpability that the president has in anything that happened in the 2016 election, and they believe that this report will exonerate the president. Now, if we listen to what Catherine Herridge said about that letter that was transmitted from Rod Rosenstein to the then Senate Judiciary Committee Chairman Chuck Grassley in June of last year, even if there was any wrongdoing on the part of the president, if it does not rise to the level of charges being filed, it may not be included in this report. But we know from what Attorney General Barr said in a statement from the Department of Justice that we may begin to hear the very earliest conclusions of this report sometime this weekend if they can be transmitted to Congress, so that may fill in some of the blanks. But again, the president's attorney saying, quote, "We are pleased that the Office of Special Counsel has delivered its report to the Attorney General pursuant to the regulations. And this now the most important part of this, Attorney General Barr will determine the appropriate next steps, whatever those may be." Brett?
John Roberts on the North Lawn will come back with any breaking news there. Getting statements now from Capitol Hill. This one from U.S. Senator Mark Warner from Virginia. He is the vice chairman of the Senate Select Committee on Intelligence. Says, quote, "Congress and the American people deserve to judge the facts for themselves. The special counsel's report must be provided to Congress immediately, and the Attorney General should swiftly prepare a declassified version of the report for the public. Nothing short of that will suffice. It's also critical that all documents related to the special counsel's investigation be preserved and made available to the appropriate congressional committees. Any attempt by the Trump administration to cover up the results of this investigation into Russia's attack on our democracy would be unacceptable." That from the Democratic vice chair of the Senate Select Committee on Intelligence. The president has said publicly on the South Lawn just the other day that he would be in favor of putting the Mueller report out to the public. He said that decision, as he's accurate to say, is up to the Attorney General, William Barr. And we saw that in Barr's confirmation hearing on Capitol Hill, peppered numerous times about how he would handle this very moment when the special counsel's report arrives at his desk. Joining us now, Chief Intelligence Correspondent Catherine Herridge with what she's hearing. Catherine.
Well, thank you, Brett. So I have a copy of the letter that was transmitted earlier this afternoon from the Attorney General William Barr to the two congressional committees with direct oversight, House Judiciary and Senate Judiciary. I just want to note a couple of things in the letter because we've hit most of the headlines already, that he is in receipt of the report and he thinks he may be able to provide to these committees principal conclusions from the report about prosecutions and decisions not to prosecute as early as this weekend, and that he will then consider, with consultation from Robert Mueller as well as his Deputy Attorney General Rod Rosenstein, how much further to go in this process and this exercise, if you will, in transparency. But when you look at William Barr's letter, what jumps out at me is that it's really by the book. Everything is cited to the Code of Federal Regulations 28 CFR 600. Everything, even the public release of this letter, which is the official notification from the Attorney General to Congress that the report has been received. So that tells me that Barr is very new in this job, but he's also sending a very clear message in this letter that he's going to be a by the book, kind of guy, according to the Code of Federal Regulations, when it comes to this information, and specifically when you look at the letter, how much additional information can be provided. And the principal players here have really staked out their position on that, which is not to go beyond department guidelines. And again, we've said this repeatedly during the hour. The guidelines, the regulations are very specific about not providing information or evidence that's damaging to an individual when a prosecution was not pursued. So again, folks at home can see this letter now. It's public, it's online, and the Attorney General, it's by the book. It's 28 CFR 600 and the different parts that apply, and specifically at the bottom he says he's elected to release this letter because there is a provision within the regulation that it can be released if he believes it's in the public interest, and that's what he states here. Just a final point, if I could. There's been a lot of talk this week about how the notification process would work, especially for the president's lawyers. And what we've learned just from John Roberts reporting is that they were given a very short timeline, a very short heads up. And I know from previous discussions, those close to the team had anticipated a much lengthier heads up, maybe several hours, to prepare for the ultimate confirmation that the report had been provided to the Attorney General. But that, for whatever reason, was not the case here, Brett.
Catherine, thank you. We'll let you make some calls, see if we get some more information. We'll head back when we do. Sarah Sanders, White House press secretary, tweeting just moments ago, saying the next steps are up to Attorney General Barr, and we look forward to the process taking its course. The White House has not received or been briefed on the special counsel's report, making clear that they haven't been briefed on the details within, but they were told at 4:45 this afternoon that, in fact, the special counsel had delivered the report to the Department of Justice. Joining us now, our Chief Justice report correspondent and also the anchor of Fox News at Night, Shannon Bream. Shannon, you know, to hear Catherine talk about it, the by-the-book language in this letter sent to the Judiciary Committee chairman and ranking members, we saw Rod Rosenstein in this 12-page letter where he said essentially that, opposite of what we saw with James Comey when he came out and talked about Hillary Clinton's email situation, that she wasn't getting indicted, but yet here's what happened and did wrong. Rosenstein saying, by the book, the FBI, the Justice Department, any special counsel is not supposed to do that.
Yeah, I think that was a case study. What happened with James Comey, then the FBI director, and Hillary Clinton was a case study for this time around that this Justice Department is not going to play any games. There probably won't be a big public statement about who is not going to be indicted, but yet spelling out all of the facts involving the decision getting to that place. And as Sarah Sanders tweeted there, that they have not been given an advance copy. The White House has not been briefed on this. There was a discussion along the way by one of the president's lawyers, Rudy Giuliani, who talked about them wanting to see any final report before it was released. And he may have been referring to what Barr will eventually release, that they may want to exert some type of executive privilege or other means for crafting or putting a spin in some way on one of these reports before it goes public. Patrick Leahy, one of the top Democrats in the Senate, been around, seen many of these things before, pointedly asked the Attorney General Barr if the president's legal team would have a chance to alter in any way any kind of report that he was going to issue. And his quote was, "That will not happen." So, yes, it looks like this department is going to try to do everything it can to salvage the public reputation of this investigation and of the department itself. They know a lot is on the line. They have taken a beating in public. All of those involved with this investigation, it being called a witch hunt, a fishing expedition, and all those other things. I think Barr, new on the job as the Attorney General, very much wants to restore the integrity, the public perception of this institution so that all Americans can feel like the Justice Department is something that is apolitical, and it is about investigating facts and nothing more, nothing less. And it seems like this rollout today certainly indicates that, Brett.
Shannon, thanks. We'll head back with more details. The special counsel, Barr writes, has submitted to me today a confidential report explaining the prosecution or declination decisions he has reached as required to advise you of the special counsel's principal conclusions as soon as this weekend, according to Barr in this letter. Separately, I intend to consult the Deputy Attorney General Rosenstein and Special Counsel Mueller to determine what other information from the report can be released to Congress and the public consistent with the law, including the special counsel regulations. Sticking to, he says, the department's longstanding practices and policies. Joining us now from New York, who you usually see this hour, Juan Williams and Dana Perino. First to you, Dana. Listen, we should step back and say that this special counsel, Robert Mueller, and his team were tasked with a narrow task to investigate Russia's into their moves into the election, and if there was a tie to the Trump campaign. And we will know sooner rather than later what the fallout from this is.
Yeah, and when we first found out at the beginning of this hour, the news that the report has been delivered to the Attorney General, one thing I ask people to remember is that while, of course, the president wants to know what it's going to say about him and his campaign and any associates from the campaign, there is also something very instructive for America coming from this report, we would imagine, and that is the extent to which Russia tried to interfere in America's election. We also know from our intelligence agencies that those efforts continue. And I don't think that in this report they're going to say, here's how we recommend America handle it going forward. But knowing the extent to which Russia went. Now remember, because there were 26 Russians who were indicted in one of these Mueller actions. And so, of course, we don't know all the details on that. Maybe this report will tell us that. I do think that aside from the questions of Trump campaign interference with the Russians or collusion, that's one thing. But the other thing really has to be what lengths that it went to try to disrupt our elections and how those efforts continue to this day. If I could say one thing about the White House and the Justice Department relationship, I worked at both. I was a spokesperson at the Justice Department before going to the White House. It is super important, and I think America should feel reassured that the Attorney General is William Barr. He understands the building, he understands the integrity of it and how important it is to uphold it, especially at a time when everybody's wanting to see what this report will say. The fact that the White House is saying we have not received the report, we have not received a briefing about the report, I think that allows everyone to say that they have been not interfering in the special counsel, that they're going to let this report come out, and that will speak volumes going forward.
Juan, the House has already approved a non-binding resolution urging the Mueller report be publicized. The Senate has not yet taken that up. We talked about that earlier. There are all these statements coming from Capitol Hill now that there needs to be transparency. Your thoughts on this moment and what Attorney General Barr is facing?
Well, I don't think there's any doubt about it, Brett. This is a historic moment. We've been waiting 2 years for this. Now we know that it's in the hands of the Attorney General, and he has to make historic decisions about this historic document. I will say there's so many questions still on the table. The last indictment was in January, Roger Stone. We don't know of any indictments since. We don't know of any plans for future indictments, but there's word that there are 12 sealed indictments still in D.C. federal courts. And we are also curious as to the extent to which the future prosecutions might take place. We heard some of this earlier from Catherine Herridge in the Southern District of New York with regard to the president's business dealings. We don't know exactly where that's going to go. What we can say is that yesterday, Thursday, the Attorney General Barr and the Deputy Attorney General Rod Rosenstein visited the White House. We don't know what was said in that meeting, but apparently nothing about the contents of the report. The president said this morning as he was leaving that he didn't know when the report might come out. So we are kind of in between right now, hoping that there might be something said quickly, because the anxiety level over the last week, not only in Washington, but for all federal prosecutors involved with this, and specifically here in New York, has been very high with anticipation. And I think it's going to be even more accelerated now that we know that the report is in Bill Barr's hands. Barr has said that the president, in his opinion, can't be indicted, and that's a consensus across the board in terms of Justice Department policy. If that's the case, then does that mean that we can't be told anything until he potentially leaves office? Again, we don't know. But I think that the pressure is on for Bill Barr to say something as quickly as possible, because it's not just political pressure, but I think the pressure of history is on his shoulders.
We should point out, Juan, that DOJ officials are telling our folks there and hinting that they may, in fact, tell Capitol Hill the conclusions of this report as soon as this weekend. And the Attorney General, in his letter to the Judiciary Committee chairs and ranking members, said as much, that it may come. And they're suggesting that, in fact, that may be the case. Dana, at this hour, the special counsel, Robert Mueller, is still the special counsel, but officially the Russia investigation is over. The president, through his lawyers, saying that he's pleased that this has finally happened. But we are in this limbo state now. We are waiting for details. The implication of this politically, what do you think it is?
Well, I also want to just point out, I just got a note from a source of mine that's familiar with the Justice Department, and he said on his read that because this is not public yet, and because they're saying just conclusions by the weekend, he thinks it actually could be quite a while before everybody is fully satisfied with getting as much information as they want. So even if they were able to do conclusions by this weekend, you know, there's going to be people from Trump supporters saying, well, we want to see the underlying FISA documents that led to Carter Page being surveilled. And on the left, they're going to say, we want to know more about X, Y, and Z. And so the pressure on the Justice Department is great. Politically, you know, I got to say, I think it's still, we have to wait and see. History has a long reach of it. The campaigns, of course, don't have that long of a reach. We're headed into a re-election effort. There is strong polarization in the country, with President Trump's supporters stalwart in their support, and the left stalwart in its resistance. I don't know if this report is actually going to satisfy either of those or move the needle at all. Perhaps with independent voters, but I think when we get down to it, because we're in March of 2015, by the time you get to the election in November of 2020, this could be old news.
You know, I just want to jump in here, Brett, and say that I think that there's going to be a contest, picking up on Dana Perino's comment, a contest of spin and interpretation with regard to this document. I think you're going to hear from Rudy Giuliani, Jay Sekulow, the president's lawyers, that given that the report is out, there's no more need for congressional investigations into Russian interference or the president's business dealings, that would amount to some kind of interference in a legitimately elected president's business. So I think that you can anticipate that. And of course, you're going to hear that on different outlets given their political orientation. But from the left, I think you're going to hear the contrary, that Mueller, given that we don't know what was not released by the Attorney General Barr, that the Congress has an obligation to continue its investigation. So even though this is a very historic moment in my mind, I don't think that it's an endpoint.
Yes, well, I don't think it's the endpoint either, based on what you see from Democrats on Capitol Hill. But if it turns out that the president somehow is exonerated or there isn't a lot of there on this report, he will clearly use that as a cudgel to try to stop the other investigations. Mitch McConnell, the Senate Majority Leader, has just put out a statement moments ago saying he welcomes the announcement of the final completed investigation into the 2016 elections. He says many Republicans have long believed that Russia poses a significant threat to American interests. I hope the special counsel's report will help and improve our efforts to protect our democracy. He goes on to say he's grateful for the experience and capability of the Attorney General, Bill Barr, and now the Attorney General needs time to do that. In other words, to digest the special counsel's report. Mitch McConnell, moments ago, putting out a statement. Judge Andrew Napolitano, senior judicial analyst for Fox News, joins us on the phone now. Judge, I keep pointing out about this. I keep pointing out that the special counsel had a narrow focus at the beginning. Judge, talk about that.
Well, we know that he expanded the focus because of the discovery of totally unrelated evidence of criminality, and he succeeded, as far as we can tell, in indicting, and at least in the case of one of those people, Paul Manafort, prosecuting and convicting for that. My guess is that since Mueller did send some things, particularly the prosecution of Michael Cohen, up to the Southern District of New York, if he has found other evidence of crimes not in any way related to either his original role or his slightly expanded role, he has done the same thing with that evidence. He can't pretend he hasn't seen it, but it might not be appropriate for him to use. I expect that will be discussed in the report as well. He'll tell us what he found and why he didn't prosecute and what he did with it.
You know, Judge, you rightly point out there are other investigations ongoing. We mentioned the Democrats up on Capitol Hill, but there's also the Southern District of New York. This special counsel report on the Russia investigation does not deal with any of that, but it does deal with specifically the allegation that there might be some collusion between the Trump campaign and Russia that affected the election. That is what this report deals with.
Well, that's the $64,000 question that everybody wants to know the answer to.
I mean, yes or no?
I don't know if he's going to say yes or no. I mean, the DOJ has 3 reports on whether the president can be indicted, three expert opinions on it. 2 say no, 1 says yes. But they all say if there's evidence of crimes where the statute of limitations would expire during the president's term, that a secret indictment should be had and kept sealed, if you can imagine such a document being kept secret, until after the president is out of office. There are also, I need to add, Brett, things that the law does not permit Bill Barr to reveal. So if evidence to a grand jury was given which did not result in an indictment, that evidence cannot be revealed. If classified materials were shared to a grand jury, whether they produced an indictment or not, they can't be revealed. If federal undercover officials testified before a grand jury, whether that produced an indictment or not, their identities cannot be revealed. So Bob Mueller knows this. Bill Barr and his team know this. I would imagine that Bill Barr and his team are looking for things like this now, lest they inadvertently violate the law themselves by revealing what the law commands be kept secret.
Judge, stand by if you would. As we go through this step by step, we are getting new information. The DOJ not telling us much. We're even asking how long is this report, the special counsel report, telling our producer they won't tell how many pages it is, but that it is, quote, comprehensive. There was also all this talk that President throughout these 2 years was going to fire special counsel Mueller, or he was somehow going to be blocked from investigating. Catherine Herridge joins us again with more from that letter and the Attorney General sending to Capitol Hill. Catherine?
Well, Brett, this letter is very crisp and concise with its language, and every time you read it, there's something else that kind of comes to the fore. And a line that's caught my attention is related to CFR 600.9A3, and that is a section of the Code of Federal Regulations that relates to whether Robert Mueller wanted to take any actions that were inappropriate, and if they were blocked by the Attorney General or the acting Attorney General, they have a responsibility to notify Congress. And what the Attorney General tells Congress in the letter is that he confirms that under the statute they found nothing that indicated that Robert Mueller had acted inappropriately or beyond his scope in the Russia investigation, and actions that he requested to take were not blocked by anyone within the department. So that's another important element, that Robert Mueller, according to the Attorney General, acted appropriately, and investigative steps that he wanted to take in this case were not blocked by anyone within the Justice Department. Brett.
Oh, Catherine, on this other issue the judge mentioned, on the sealed indictments, we don't know, obviously, a lot about that, but there are more than 36 sealed criminal indictments awaiting action in D.C. federal court. 3 of them were filed in February alone. We don't even know the nature of these or whether they're tangential to any of this.
I haven't confirmed that independently. I don't know what the source of that is, because...
Okay, this is coming from our producer, William Mears.
Okay,
Bill Mears.
Okay, go ahead, just read it.
I'm just reading it.
Yeah, good.
3 of them were filed in February alone. While we do not know the nature of these sealed indictments, I am told it's a highly unusual number. So while Mueller's investigation is ending, U.S. attorneys' offices in D.C. and elsewhere could still pursue other pending investigations or indictments.
Well, I trust Bill Mears' reporting 100%. I don't want to speculate on what could be in those sealed indictments, however, or what they may mean to the... Go ahead.
All right, I just wanted to get your sense of that. We'll keep on digging here. We'll come back as you get nuggets throughout the afternoon. As we continue, Peter Doocy is up in Washington with some info. Peter?
Brett, we've now heard from the top Democrats in Congress, Nancy Pelosi, who recently said that she's not interested in pursuing impeachment proceedings at any point against President Trump, and Chuck Schumer, who said, let's just wait for the Mueller report. So I'm going to read to you from a joint statement from both Pelosi and Schumer. It says, now that Special Counsel Mueller has submitted his report to the Attorney General, it is imperative for Mr. Barr to make the full report public and provide its underlying documentation and findings to Congress. Attorney General Barr must not give President Trump, his lawyers, or his staff any sneak preview of Special Counsel Mueller's findings or evidence, and the White House must not be allowed to interfere in decisions about what parts of those findings or evidence are made public. The Special Counsel's investigation focused on questions that go to the integrity of our democracy itself, whether foreign powers corruptly interfered in our elections and whether unlawful means were used to hinder that investigation. The American people have a right to the truth. The watchword is transparency. And separate from that, Brett, I just spoke on the phone to a key Trump ally on the Republican side on Capitol Hill who said the fact that we found out the report had been submitted but did not instantly find out about new indictments, this lawmaker thinks is a positive step for the president. And again, Republicans are seem pleased, at least for now, that the word collusion has not been used by anybody at the Justice Department, even though we don't know what's in the report. Brett.
Yeah. Peter, thank you. Senator Lindsey Graham, who's now the head of the Judiciary Committee, the chair, releasing a statement moments ago saying that this notification indicates that Attorney General Barr will pursue as much transparency as possible. That is the watchword up on Capitol Hill. Adding, though, importantly, the notification also indicates that there were no areas of disagreement between the Attorney General or the acting Attorney General and Special Counsel Mueller regarding courses of action. This information is specifically required to be disclosed by the regulations governing Special Counsel reports. He says he'll work with the ranking member Feinstein and the colleagues to get as much transparency as possible. I have always believed it was important that Mr. Mueller be allowed to do his job without interference, and that has been accomplished. Some of the things that Catherine Harris was just pointing to, that none of the Mueller requests or investigations were blocked in any way, and that there is a consensus on ways forward, at least now, from the Attorney General, the Special Counsel, and the Deputy Attorney General, who at one time was the Acting Attorney General, Rod Rosenstein. Joining us now on the phone, senior political analyst Brit Hume. Brit, your thoughts in this moment?
Well, a couple of things to keep in mind, Brett. Remember when the original letter was written appointing Robert Mueller, he was tasked, originally the first task given him was to take over the counterintelligence investigation that had been undertaken under James Comey into what the Russians did. And as a subset of that, the possibility of that there was any collaboration between the Russians and the Trump campaign was to be investigated as well. So it never was principally about what has come to be called so often collusion. It was first and foremost an effort to find out what exactly the Russians did. That was the investigation he assumed. So I think we can anticipate, Brett, that while there may be no further criminal charges growing out of the Mueller investigation, the report will have a lot to say about what the Russians did, tried to do, how they did it, and all that, which I think, is something we all want to know, and it may give us a sense for the first time, really, of, really how effective it was and whether it could possibly have made any kind of significant difference in the outcome of the election.
It's interesting to see these men who are now in charge. Bill Barr, who you've known in Washington for quite some time, the Attorney General under George H.W. Bush, now back in that seat. Rod Rosenstein, in his position, has been under fire for quite some time, but both by the book guys, by their history and by their previous experience.
Yeah, and as has been pointed out by others, including, I think, Shannon Bream made the point that these are men who I think it's fair to say are deeply preoccupied with the task of getting the Justice Department back in the nation's good graces and trying to wipe away the stains that have occurred there because of the behavior of certain officials at the department as well as officials at the FBI. So a lot's riding on this, and you can see that, you know, as the outlines of these men and their efforts to abide by the regulations, go by the book. And of course, that insulates them to some extent as well from any political criticism. You could hear the partisanship embodied in the statements that were coming off Capitol Hill, and that's to be expected. And staying within the regulations is a good way to defend against that.
Excuse me, Brett, sorry to interrupt. Senior Department of Justice official telling our own Jake Gibson, quote, Special Counsel Mueller is not recommending any further indictments. Again, the news coming from the Department of Justice, a senior DOJ official, quote, Special Counsel Robert Mueller not recommending any further indictments.
Well, that's significant, Brett, although I think it's when it comes to this, you know, the question we're all waiting finally at long last for the answer to, on this question of collaboration. It's been discussed at some length throughout all of this, whether if there were such collaboration, it would be a crime. And if Mr. Mueller decides that no indictment should ensue because of that, that doesn't necessarily mean he didn't find any improper hanky-panky between the Trump campaign and the Russians. It may just be that he found that it wasn't criminal. Now, my own sense about this is that it's hard to imagine that it's come as far as we have, with as much effort has been made to investigate this whole matter, both inside and outside the government, that if there'd been any such thing, that we wouldn't have heard about it by now. But it is worth keeping in mind that there is this legal question of whether if it had been turned up, it would have even been a crime, and therefore if there are no further indictments, that might not mean that they found nothing improper.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, there's a lot that we don't know yet, but that sentence in and of itself, after all of the months and months of speculation of what could happen, the fact that they are saying that this special counsel report does not recommend any further indictments is significant in and of itself, just on its face. It's right to point out that the Southern District of New York is continuing its investigation, that there are more investigations on Capitol Hill. But if this report, Britt, does not deliver the punch that perhaps critics of the president or Democrats had hoped it would, and it seemed like the coverage over recent days, there was a preparation for that fact up on Capitol Hill. If it doesn't, will the president then take that and say, see, I told you so, you need to stop and move on and get things done?
Yeah, he undoubtedly will say that. And I would suggest this, Brett, that Democrats on Capitol Hill have already been signaling that even if he doesn't find anything in the neighborhood of collaboration, that they intend to pursue that issue further. Particularly Adam Schiff on the House Intelligence Committee intends to pursue that. I think if Mueller comes out and there is nothing suggesting improper behavior between the president and the Russians before the election, I think a lot of the political wind will go out of those sails, because a lot of people are going to look at this and say, "Come on! I mean, you've been pursuing this all this time. Now Mueller, whose long-awaited report is upon us, he didn't find anything. What are you doing?" So my sense about that is that while those investigations may drag on, they may have to drag on with a lot less media attention than they once would have hoped for.
Britt, as always, thank you. We'll be checking in. We've been waiting for this report, this moment, for a long, long time. It seemed it was coming a week ago, 2 weeks ago, and then it was any day, and then we didn't know. Just for the official record, including today, the Mueller special counsel probe has lasted 675 days, or 1 year, 10 months, and 6 days. It has been talked about in recent days, the president and Democrats talking about what may happen once it comes out. Take a listen.
I have no idea about the Mueller report. There was no collusion. There was no obstruction. Everybody knows it. It's all a big hoax. I call it the witch hunt. It's all a big hoax. So we'll see what happens. I know that the Attorney General, highly respected, ultimately will make a decision.
This is an important national security investigation that we just have to allow to run its course. The House just voted 420-0 to make sure that when Bob Mueller completes his work and finishes his report, that report can be seen by the American people.
And we pointed out before the House passed that the Senate has not taken that up. Shannon Bream joins us again. Shannon, thoughts?
Well, when you think about this, Dana Perino brought up a great point. She talked about the fact that both sides are going to want to see the underlying documentation, even if some form, as we know, eventually of the report is going to be released by the Attorney General. They want to see the underlying interviews, documents, everything that Mueller had. Now, the Democrats want this for a number of reasons, I think. As Britt was just talking about, they may want to use it to try to pursue impeachment because, you know, there's a different level, a different standard of proof if you're going to pursue an indictment or a prosecution versus an impeachment. So that may be beneficial to them in that way. It may also force a very nasty legal standoff because the chair of the House Intelligence Committee, Adam Schiff, has said, I'm going to be on Barr like nobody's business. I'm going to see if he's trying to bury any part of this. And there's talk, you know, that the chairs of those important committees, House Judiciary and Intel, of course, now both controlled by Democrats, that they could try to subpoena Mueller, some of his investigators, some of the documents, and that could set up a really nasty battle. As you know, the Justice Department falls within the executive branch. The president heads the executive branch. If it came to it and there were subpoenas, he could conceivably tell them not to comply with those subpoenas. That's something I expect would take you almost, immediately to the Supreme Court or in very quick fashion. So there are a lot of legal things that could still play out here for the president because we know that regardless of what version of the report comes out, we've heard the statements leading up to it. They are consistent again today from Democratic leaders saying every bit of this has to be public. It's about transparency. The American people have a right to know. We're getting, things from the ACLU and other left-leaning groups. It's the